TV. Really excited to sit down with Tara Goodwin, Nancy Capistran, who are the founders of the Crisis Management Company. I got into the details with them about what is a crisis, how do you handle it, best strategies, best practices so you stay afloat, and how you can pre-plan for a crisis when the seas are calm in order to give yourself the best case scenario. So let's go jump in.
Hi everybody, welcome to Giant TV. This is Paul Hitchcock and really excited to have my guests on here today who are the co-founders of Crisis Interception, Nancy Capistran and Tara Goodwin. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I want to jump into this. I was looking on your website and I want to first understand what exactly you're focused on, but the tagline that caught my attention was turning chaos into control. So I love it because I have 4 kids. My life is chaotic all the time. So that really resonates with me. So tell me, hey, Nancy, you want to start? What is it you're focused on?
So we often, most companies, we deal with the executive team, a lot of times the CEO and business owners, and when they are dealing with their day-to-day things, they have skills and expertise in that space. But when combined with that, they're trying to handle a crisis situation where the sky is falling, that's where they become kind of really stressed, like, oh my gosh, everything that I work for is falling apart. And so that's where Tara and I, because we are very experienced in our diverse depth and breadth of experience with crisis, we come in and oftentimes, crisis interception. If you think about football, when you intercept a football, you immediately take it in a more favorable direction for your team. And so that's what we do when we come in to try to diffuse the situation as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned you have a background in crisis management. I'd love to hear from each of you a little bit about what is your background that got you into this.
Tara, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I started many, many years ago in public relations, and I worked for Edelman, which is a global PR company. And the CEO, Richard Edelman, was very, very big on crisis management and crisis response. And I learned under his wing, so to speak, and I was very intrigued looking at how strategic communications and what we say or do could either stop a crisis in its tracks or neutralize it. And I was absolutely fascinated. So when I started my own PR firm, I brought crisis practice into that firm and did that exclusively until I met Nancy, who is, a rock star and someone who I had been wanting to meet for years and just didn't know it, because I look at what's going on in a crisis in the court of public opinion. What is the media saying? What are the stakeholders saying? How is the company's image being perceived in a crisis? While Nancy looks inside the company, she looks at the executives. Are they showing up as their best selves in a crisis? Are they able to navigate when there are so many things coming at them? Do they need additional support? And those are the kinds of things that we bring to companies that are in crisis. But also, Paul, an important piece of this is planning for it, because Nancy and I love managing crises and helping executives get through some bad situations. But a lot of this could be much easier if there was a little planning that went into it.
Yeah, I want to get into some of the particulars. Nancy, your background in crisis, how did you get into this?
So mine was actually, I guess the best way to say it was a tap on the shoulder. I've worked for startups to multi-billion-dollar international organizations, and I kept getting these taps on the shoulder when there was something really thorny that was going on in the company, and they would take just a few individuals and put them in a room and figure this out. And I remember even September 11th, the impact. I was working for a multi-billion-dollar company at that point. And there was 3 of us put in a room and said, what do we need to be doing here? We had people in the air. What do we need to do from an international perspective, but especially in the Boston area, what do we need to do? And so it just kept evolving where I would keep being put in, asked to help out with certain situations. And so that organic experience became really important, and some extreme situations I was in the heart of a number of times. And it just kind of took from there. And I realized that I had these skills that I didn't know I had. And, then starting my own business and talking to Tara, and then we combined together, and we've been just doing some amazing work. And we really are, oftentimes people call us a dynamic duo, because a lot of times we're almost finishing each other's sentences, but we look at it from two different lenses, and that's what's really powerful.
Yeah, so you complement each other there. That's great. So here's my couple questions I have is that as we get into your business, you're not a PR firm, right? So what is the difference between a PR firm and what you're doing?
So I'll take that because I do run a PR firm. When PR professionals handle crisis, they often parachute in, write a few sentences, coach the CEO very briefly, do a little media training, and they're out, and it's gone. But the effects of crisis last a lot longer than that. And you need additional support throughout that crisis. And Nancy and I knew that we needed to do a deeper dive with our clients in making sure not only are they prepared for crisis situations, but they have the necessary tools to resume business as usual, that business continuity piece afterwards, because that can be just as catastrophic as navigating through the crisis. So that's why we feel that we bring the full solution for crisis situations and planning. We look at it in crisis, we look at it before crisis and anticipate what could happen, but then we also look at crisis cleanup and that continuity piece, which is so essential.
Yeah, very good explanation, which now gets me into what is a crisis? You say crisis, I'm thinking of a million different things that go on, cyber attacks, somebody gets killed, I don't know. What do you deal with as a crisis? Nancy, maybe you want to start? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's many different ones that we've handled. There could be like a client that I was talking to yesterday, a brand new client that has some challenges with social media and what was out there about him that was false. And how do we go about handling that? And he is really maxed. He's just so stressed. It's impacting every aspect of his life. So I work on a lot of that coaching piece of it, and trying to help him to not just focus on the negatives, to try to, change the narrative into a more positive, and how can we help him to do that? And, also doing some of the social media things that would best support him. We do things like, I'm just trying to think of some of them, and Tara, jump in with any of them, but we've done things from, a CEO was at the Bruins game, and on the way home, he had a massive heart attack on the Mass Pike, and, crashed his car and died. And he was in the middle of a major acquisition, and it was all the intellectual property was here, not documented. There wasn't a second in command. So it created a tremendous amount of challenges. There's also been a law firm that it was a family law firm, two brothers, and the managing partner, he had just had his annual checkup that day. He was a constant runner, just very athletic. And he had fallen asleep and never woke up. He had a brain aneurysm that night. And also he had everything here, and the law firm just went to its knees, not only because of the emotionalness of the loss, but also because they had all these lawsuits in place that he was, the key person, and they didn't have knowledge on any of them. And so, it really could sabotage a business in a meaningful way, that unless you've got the right support pretty much immediately to be able to help with those situations and kind of get through the emotionalness of it to what do you need? What is the action that needs to happen? We've had environmental things, we've had rogue employees, we've had harassment, we've had CFOs stealing from companies, or other key employees that have access to the crown jewels, and what's happened with that. Tara, do you want to add to that?
Sure. We've had industrial accidents. We've had people feeling that they were being squeezed out of their own company and they wanted to take action. We've also had celebrities that have had some issues with other celebrities that we've had to navigate through crisis situations. It really truly depends on the severity and how it unfolds. And I think the commonalities of it, from a business perspective, there are personal crises and there are business crises. From a business perspective, every crisis problem starts out as a business problem. So you have to look at what the business problem is. And sometimes you just get small little pieces of it until it accelerates. So you have to look at what you're seeing and maybe anticipate a little bit that this could lead to something if we don't head it off at the pass right now. Examples, totally. Cybercrime, huge.
Right.
Had a client a couple of years ago that was completely shut down as a manufacturer. They had to go back to an old school way of writing invoices by hand with Sharpies because they were completely out.
Yeah.
And how do you talk to your customers? How do you communicate? How do you talk to your employees and then fix the problem?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because in the example you gave, Nancy, of somebody passing away that, there's no succession plan in place and, all the IPs up in the head, as you were saying that, there's so many things that come up with that. I can imagine. I mean, there's the business aspect of it, keeping the business running. Who is next in line? What are the legal impacts of that? Is there a buy-sell agreement? I mean, none of those things exist, just the business impact. But what about the personal side of that too? Like, the spouse coming in, hey, we own this business, what's going on? I mean, there's, money due to the spouse. I mean, that could just be like hugely ugly if that's not handled. So in a case like that, what does that SWOT scenario look like? Like, somebody calls you, what happens? You go to the company, you gather the people. I mean, what actually do you do when you execute on it?
Nancy, do you want to say?
Sure, I'll start that. So basically what we do is we do rapid due diligence. And that's basically Tara and I depending on how fast the sky is falling, oftentimes we try to get on the phone or get on mostly a Zoom call as quick as possible, right. Because we don't know where people are located and we just need to get to understanding what's going on. Let's gather the facts, and we have a certain checklist of questions that we're asking so we get the most important data right out of the gate. We also want to understand what the culture is and what the values and mission and goals are of the company so that we can best support that as well. And traditionally, what we do a little bit different than other crisis management companies is that we are hired through the attorney that the company is using, because then we've got more protection from a non-disclosure perspective.
The attorney, what do you mean? Like a business attorney or like?
Yeah, so, the business attorney.
Okay.
And if they don't have one, we have relations with a number of different business attorneys, depending on what the situation was and what that expertise was needed. We can help to connect them to somebody that will best support them in the particular crisis that they're having. So what that does is it protects the client from, if it ever does go to court, and we have had ones that have gone to court, but being able to best protect the information that we're sharing and the conversations that we're having. So that we feel is a really important component. Like I said, that most crisis management companies do not do. As a matter of fact, I don't think we know of any that do that. But we think that we're trying to look out for the client and what's best for them and how we can rapidly get to making a meaningful difference for them.
Oh yeah, because those things get ugly. I mean, if somebody dies and the spouse is there coming in and there's money's there, and who's going to take over? I mean, those things, I can't imagine there isn't a chance they do end up in litigation and so forth. Yeah. It gets very emotional.
For sure, it does. And that's why we try to bring that calmness to the situation and focus on the highest and most important issues at that moment. And that evolves. It's a living, breathing thing. But oftentimes people just think it's not going to happen to them. And really,
right.
It's going to. It's just a matter of when and how severe. And if they have, somebody like us in their Rolodex, I mean, that's going to age me, but when I say those words, but, but having somebody that is on speed dial to be able to help with those situations and jump in and understand. And, Tara and I we kind of ask lots of questions in that beginning piece. And then she kind of takes the PR and the communications piece of it. I take more of the executive coaching and kind of stabilizing what's happening with the emotional component and trying to get them to really focus on the highest and best use of their time and effort.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you how you divide your time as partners in that, and that makes a lot of sense. You go with your focus areas there, And are you working with companies? Are there particular industries that are more prevalent for you who you work with? Is it just all over the map?
It's really all over the map. We've worked with construction companies. We work with financial service companies. We work with big pharma. It truly depends on the extent and scope of the crisis. The principles are all the same. The industries are only what's different, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of household name people that we've worked with. And obviously we have, confidentiality things, so we can't really talk about them, but they would be household names. And we just do what we need to do. And a lot of times we're, kind of behind the scenes and very busy trying to help them to show up as the best version of themselves in very difficult times.
And what does the engagement look like? Someone hires you. Is it a period of time, and how long is it normally? Or is it just variable? Tara, maybe you can answer that. Yeah.
Right. And it's hard to predict how long a crisis is going to have legs, as they say, because you just never know what's going to be uncovered as you're on this journey. But we start with a flat fee, and that allows us to come in, do the download that Nancy described, and then put together the infrastructure, whether that's messaging, whether they need a holding statement for the media, whether they need an employee communication. It all depends on what they need, but that usually gets them through the first phase. And that takes probably around 10 to 15 hours of our time. That's phase one. Then we watch, wait, and monitor once communications and once a strategy is executed. And then there may be additional communications. There may be new information that's coming out. And we may have to respond. We may choose not to respond. But we stay with the client until the crisis actually winds down and they start to get back to normal. And then Nancy will come in and finish up with them and talk about ways that they can hopefully recover from that crisis situation that we've all just been through, but also work with their employees and ensure that that business continuity piece doesn't miss any more beats if it did in the first place.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, Nancy. When you get involved with the executives, team members, do they ever have you get up, front and center with employees? I mean, are you, on the stage, or are you doing stuff behind the scenes and just guiding them?
Usually our preference is to have them out there because they have the relationship with the employees. We're an unknown to the employees, and to give comfort and, kind of the accuracy and that credibility and building that, continuing to build the respect that they have internal. We usually coach those individuals, whoever's going to be the speaker. And Tara, why don't you talk a little bit about having them in the hot seat, what that looks like in the training that we do with that?
Sure. And we call it, there's not a lot of humor in crisis, but we do call it one throat to choke, because when there's a crisis, people want to see the CEO. They don't want to see me as a company spokesperson. They don't want to see the number two. They want reassurance from that CEO, what he or she is doing to remedy the situation and take steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So one of the things that we specialize in is pre-crisis training. So we will go through and ask them, Paul, what are your worst fears about your company?
I was thinking that right now. Sorry to interrupt. I just was thinking that exact question. What do you do ahead of time? Go on. Yeah.
Exactly. So we start talking about what could befall you and your company and cause damage. From that point, we will set up a training situation for the media. So we will come in with a television camera with large hot lights, and we'll sit there and we'll start asking you some questions. So tell me what happened. And you would have to respond to a mock crisis scenario.
Okay.
But then we will start going for the jugular and asking some very difficult questions that you may or may not have the answer to. And we don't do this to torture you. We do this to prepare you for the types of questions that you're going to be asked, so executives can feel more confident when the spotlight hits.
So companies can hire you when there's no crisis going on, but just to get the plan in place.
Believe it or not, Paul, we actually prefer that to a certain degree.
I get it.
Because preparation and training makes it so much easier. And we also do workshops. We go out in the field and we'll work directly with CEOs. And one of the things that we do is we will provide mock crisis situations. So let's say there are 20 CEOs in the room. We'll pick 5 companies and do a deep dive research. And we will scare the bejesus out of them, because we will identify a scenario that names employees, names streets, names vehicles, and puts them on the hot seat. And you can watch their face go from, smiling to completely somber. And then they work with the other team members in the workshop to navigate through that by putting together a holding statement to think about, should we respond? If we respond, what do we have to say? And how can we work together to have the best possible statement to protect the reputation of the CEO and the company?
When you show up for those prep meetings, do you have a robe on with a black hood and a big, I'm already scared just listening to it.
No, but we do show them a lot of situations that have been mishandled, so that they can get an idea. And we'll show national examples of poorly managed crises.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they'll say, well, that's not us. We're not a multi-billion-dollar company. And I will say, yes, it is, because you can have the exact same crisis on a smaller scale. It doesn't negate the severity of the issue.
Yep. Nancy, you were going to comment?
Yes, thanks, Paul. So you know that I'm a Vistage peer advisory chair. And Tara is actually a speaker for Vistage. So she travels the country doing those speaking engagements and putting people in, these CEOs into these spots, because oftentimes they just don't, it's not revenue generating. So they're not focused on it. It's like, it's just, someday we'll get to it, or it's just not important. But I have experienced it, because I've had Tara come into my groups, and she makes them sweat, and they're like, whoa. And because she makes it feel real. So, those mock drills that she talks about are very impactful. And Tara, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We take them through everything. One of the things that is a huge mistake in a crisis situation is over communicating. You don't want to kill an ant with a cannonball. You want to, put out the right type of communication at the right time. And so we look at, should we even respond in the first place? Where should we respond? If it starts on social media, do we respond on social media? Do we issue a huge press release? Do we have a press conference? And sometimes that desire to just put out the fire has them in an overkill situation, which we don't want to happen. So we'll talk all about that. We'll show video. I have a little show and tell. I try to inject some humor into it, because it is a very serious topic. And then we go directly into the crisis scenarios and give them the tools to manage it. I don't want to stand up there and talk to people. That's not what my passion is. My passion is to be able to see the light in their eyes with the idea, I can do this myself. I just need some tools. And Nancy and I come in with the toolbox to help them do that.
Oh, and it's awesome, because the best time to plan for that is when the seas are calm, right? Is not when the house is rattling from the earthquake. Oh my gosh, you're calling the insurance company. I need earthquake insurance. Too late. You don't have a plan. You're screwed. So what is that deliverable when you do the pre-planning? Do they get something? Is there like a playbook, a blueprint you give them saying, okay, here it is? Or how do you handle that?
Nancy,
Sarah, do you want to take that? Oh, I can. It's fine. Go ahead. You can. Go ahead.
So we have, Nancy and I spent over a year and a half developing a crisis planning guide that we work through with clients that are interested in pre-planning for a crisis. So it is their own proprietary guidebook. It's digital, and they can also print it out. And that will enable them to go through the steps that we take them through, imagining what are your worst case scenarios, because as I'm sure you know, not all companies will have the same worst case scenarios. There may be versions of them, but maybe one is more worried about a cyber breach and another one is more worried about an accident in their machine shop. So again, we would ask them to self-identify. We would help them put down those worst case scenarios. We would review it, and we would help them write responses. And this is the weird part that people can't get their arms around. We'll say, okay, these are your 5 top scenarios that you're most afraid of. Let's take that a step further and put together a draft statement, assuming that happens to your company. And they'll say, well, it's not going to be the same. Well, of course it's not, but it's going to be along the same lines. And you will have a template that you can put in details and get a statement out much faster if you have pre-planned and thought about the kinds of things that you're going to say, the core values that your company shares.
Love it.
And, with a little bit of forethought, and it doesn't take a long time, but it does take some time.
Mm-hmm. And will you, I just love this information. What is your initial step? I mean, if somebody wanted to do a strategy session, or, do you have that offer up front where you'll get on with them and, kind of talk about their business and, at least get some initial indication of what it would mean for them? Do you have a strategy session there up front?
I think, and I can speak for Nancy, or she can add to this, but we are open to customize whatever the client needs at any particular point in time, because crisis in and of itself is completely unique to a specific business. It's their own personal crisis that they're dealing with. So if someone wants to talk to us about a strategy session or a workshop for their employees, we are flexible and can design a program that's right for them.
Got it. Yeah. Nancy, did you want to comment on that at all?
Yes, thank you. So it's almost like, here's a couple key points. There needs to be a risk assessment done for each company, and that looks very different. And is it what are the top 3 to 5 most likely risks that could impact in a very big way the company? And then it's looking at, okay, who are the people that are going to be on that team, the crisis team? And oftentimes that's not thought of ahead of time. And it's really important to know which particular roles are important, whether you have them inside the company or it's going to be an outsourced person, and identifying who that is. So when the sky is falling, it's a quick response to be able to get people together. Oftentimes it's sometimes technology. If there's a hack, and the system's down, if you don't have your information, you can't get it, whether it's on your cell phone or something else, because you can't use any technology because of, what happened, the breach. You need to have something in writing. And that's why Tara talked earlier about printing out your crisis plan, or having just an Excel spreadsheet with who needs to be in the room for these discussions. Because if you don't have certain voices at the table, you're going to miss really important pieces, and the results are not going to nearly be as robust as they should be without having some of that pre-planning.
Excellent. Crisis Interception is the company. Turning chaos into control is my favorite. And Nancy and Tara, thank you so much. Incredible. And I want to tell everybody that's watching here that we're streaming this everywhere. So YouTube, LinkedIn, it's going out there. And the information to contact the company and these ladies will be up around wherever you're watching this. And get in touch with them, follow them. Great resource to have. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.